Marcus Rivera had seen enough wedding disasters in his 15 years as a hotel security guard to know when trouble was brewing. The Grand Meridian Hotel was known for hosting elaborate weddings, and with them came every kind of drama imaginable. Drunk uncles starting fights, ex-boyfriends crashing ceremonies, vendors threatening to walk out over unpaid bills. But something about the scene unfolding in the hotel's marble lobby that Saturday evening felt different. The woman stood near the elevator bank still wearing her wedding dress, though it was now wrinkled and stained with what looked like wine and tears. Her dark hair had escaped its elaborate updo, hanging in loose strands around her face. She clutched a small purse and kept glancing nervously toward the hotel entrance, as if expecting someone to burst through the doors at any moment. Marcus had been making his routine rounds when he first spotted her 20 minutes ago. She'd been pacing near the concierge desk, looking lost and frightened. Now she seemed frozen in place, her shoulders shaking with what he assumed were sobs. "Excuse me, miss," Marcus approached carefully, keeping his voice gentle. He'd learned over the years that wedding emergencies required a delicate touch. "Is everything okay? Do you need assistance?" The woman looked up at him with eyes that were red-rimmed but surprisingly clear. She wasn't crying, he realized. She was angry. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice trembled. "Just waiting for my ride." Marcus glanced around the lobby. It was nearly 10 o'clock, and the wedding reception on the mezzanine level had been winding down for the past hour. Most guests had already left or moved to the hotel bar. "Are you sure? You look like you might need some help. Is your husband coming to pick you up?" Something flickered across her face at the word husband. "No," she said quickly. "He's not coming. No one's coming, actually." She laughed, but it was a hollow sound. "Turns out my ride home was contingent on me going through with the whole charade." Marcus felt a protective instinct kick in. He'd seen this before. Brides left stranded after weddings went wrong. Sometimes it was family drama, sometimes financial disputes, sometimes the groom himself caused problems. But this woman seemed different. There was a steel in her backbone despite her obvious distress. "Look, I don't know what happened up there," Marcus said, nodding toward the mezzanine, "but you shouldn't have to wait here all night. The hotel can call you a taxi, or if there's someone I can contact for you." "That's kind of you," she said, and for the first time, her expression softened slightly. "But I think I need to figure this out on my own. I just need a few more minutes to think." Marcus studied her face. In his experience, people who said they needed to think were usually running from something. "What's your name?" "Elena," she said after a moment's hesitation. "I'm Marcus. I work security here." He showed her his badge. "Elena, I don't want to pry, but if someone's bothering you or if you're in some kind of danger, I can help. That's what I'm here for." Elena looked at him with something that might have been gratitude. "You're sweet, Marcus, but this isn't the kind of problem that security can fix." She paused, seeming to wrestle with something internally. "Though I suppose you could say I'm protecting myself from my own bad decisions." "Wedding getting called off isn't always a bad decision," Marcus said carefully. "Sometimes it's the smartest thing a person can do." Elena's laugh this time was more genuine. "Is that your professional opinion, Officer Rivera?" She'd read his name tag. "That's my human opinion," Marcus replied. "The professional opinion is that you shouldn't be standing around in a hotel lobby in a wedding dress at 10 o'clock at night without a clear plan for getting home safely." "Fair point." Elena looked around the lobby as if seeing it for the first time. "I suppose I am making quite a scene." Marcus followed her gaze. A few hotel guests had indeed been staring as they passed through the lobby. A woman in a wedding dress always drew attention, but one who looked like she'd been through a battle was practically a magnet for curious eyes. "The hotel has a business center," Marcus offered. "It's quiet, and you could make some phone calls if you need to arrange transportation. Or there's a small lounge on the second floor that's usually empty this time of night. Elena considered this. Actually, that sounds perfect. I do need to make some calls, figure out where I'm going to sleep tonight. You don't have somewhere to go? The protective instinct flared stronger. I do, Elena said quickly. I have options. I just need to decide which one feels least like admitting defeat. Marcus led her toward the elevator, pressing the button for the second floor. As they rose, he found himself studying her reflection in the polished doors. Despite everything, there was something elegant about her, something that suggested she wasn't accustomed to being in chaotic situations. Her posture was straight, her voice educated, her dress clearly expensive even in its current disheveled state. "Can I ask what happened?" Marcus said as they stepped off the elevator. "You don't have to answer, but sometimes it helps to talk about it." Elena was quiet for so long that Marcus thought she wasn't going to respond. Then, as they reached the small lounge he'd mentioned, she spoke. "Have you ever had one of those moments where you realized that everything you thought you knew about your life was wrong?" Marcus thought about his ex-wife, about the day he'd come home early from work to find her packed bags by the door and divorce papers on the kitchen table. "Yeah," he said, "I have." "Then you know that feeling where you're standing in the middle of your life, and it suddenly feels like you're wearing someone else's clothes." Elena sank into one of the lounge chairs, her dress pooling around her like a cloud. "That's what happened tonight. Right there at the altar, I realized I was about to promise to love someone I didn't even recognize anymore." Marcus took the chair across from her. He should probably get back to his rounds, but something told him this conversation wasn't finished. "Cold feet? Or something more serious?" "Something much more serious." Elena's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I realized that the man I was about to marry had spent the last 2 years slowly convincing me that I was crazy, that my feelings were wrong, my instincts were flawed, my friends were jealous, my family was interfering. Tonight, standing there listening to him recite vows about cherishing and respecting me, I finally understood what had been happening." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd seen enough domestic situations in his security work to recognize the signs she was describing. "Elena, are you safe right now? I mean, is he looking for you?" "Probably." She shrugged as if it didn't matter, but Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders. "But not in the way you're thinking. David isn't violent. He's much more subtle than that. He'll be worried about what people think, about the deposits we'll lose, about how this makes him look. The last thing he'll want is a scene." "But you're still worried." Elena met his eyes. "I'm worried about myself, about how easy it was for him to make me doubt my own mind, about how close I came to walking into a marriage where I would have spent the rest of my life apologizing for existing." Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a recognition of pain he'd never experienced but somehow understood. "What made you stop? What made you realize?" "His sister," Elena said with a bitter smile. "During the ceremony she was crying, and I thought it was because she was happy for us. But then I realized she wasn't looking at me with joy. She was looking at me with pity. And in that moment I understood that everyone could see what I couldn't, that I was disappearing, piece by piece." They sat in silence for a moment. Marcus found himself thinking about all the times he'd responded to domestic calls, all the women who'd insisted everything was fine, even as they clutched bruises on their arms. But Elena's situation was different, more complex. The wounds weren't visible, but they were clearly just as deep. "So what's your plan?" Marcus asked finally. "Honestly, I have no idea." Elena laughed, and this time it sounded almost free. "For the first time in 2 years, I have absolutely no plan, and it's terrifying and wonderful at the same time." "Where were you supposed to live? I mean, after tonight?" "David's house. Well, our house now, I suppose, though I never felt like it was really mine." Everything in it was his choice, his style, his preferences. I used to have my own apartment, but he convinced me to give it up 6 months ago, said it was silly to pay rent when I could just move in with him. Marcus nodded, recognizing another red flag. Do you have somewhere you can go tonight? My sister lives about an hour away. I could call her. Elena paused. Actually, I should call her anyway. She's probably wondering what happened. David told me not to invite her to the wedding because she stirred up drama. But now I'm thinking he just didn't want her there because she could see through him. Families often can, Marcus said. Sometimes that's why certain people try to isolate their partners from them. Elena looked at him with surprise. You sound like you know something about this. I've seen a lot of things in this job, Marcus said carefully, and I've made some mistakes of my own. Different ones, but still. He stood up. Look, I should let you make your calls. But Elena, if you need anything tonight, anything at all, here's my card. The hotel number goes to the front desk, but my personal cell is on there too. Elena took the card, turning it over in her hands. Thank you, Marcus. I mean that. You didn't have to be kind to a crazy woman in the lobby. You're not crazy, Marcus said firmly. And even if you were, everyone deserves kindness. As he walked back toward the elevator, Marcus found himself thinking about Elena's words. The way she'd described feeling like she was wearing someone else's clothes resonated with him in a way he hadn't expected. His own marriage had ended for different reasons, but he remembered that sense of loss, of not recognizing the life he was living. He made his rounds mechanically, checking doors and windows, but his mind kept drifting back to the woman in the wedding dress. There was something about her situation that felt incomplete, like there were pieces of the story she hadn't shared yet. Not that she owed him an explanation, but Marcus had learned to trust his instincts about people. When he passed by the second-floor lounge an hour later, Elena was still there, but she'd changed. She'd managed to find a hotel shop bag somewhere, and though she was still wearing the wedding dress, she'd pulled her hair back into a simple ponytail and washed the makeup from her face. She was on the phone, speaking in low tones. I know, Sarah, I know you told me, she was saying. Yes, you were right about everything. Can you just come get me, please? Marcus didn't want to eavesdrop, but he couldn't help feeling relieved that she'd contacted someone. As he continued his rounds, he found himself hoping that whoever Sarah was, she would take good care of Elena. But something told him this was only the beginning of Elena's story, not the end. And something else, something he didn't want to examine too closely, told him that his own story had somehow become entangled with hers in ways he didn't yet understand. The night was far from over, and Marcus had a feeling that by morning, everything would look different than it had a few hours ago. For both of them. 3 hours later, Marcus was finishing his final rounds when he heard raised voices coming from the hotel's main entrance. Through the glass doors, he could see Elena standing on the sidewalk with a man in an expensive suit. Even from a distance, Marcus could tell the conversation wasn't going well. Elena had changed out of her wedding dress and into jeans and a sweater that someone must have brought her. But her body language was rigid, defensive. The man was gesturing animatedly, leaning into her space in a way that made Marcus's jaw clench. Without thinking, Marcus pushed through the doors and stepped outside. Elena, is everything okay? The man in the suit turned, his face flushed with anger. He was about Marcus's age, maybe a few years younger, with the kind of polished appearance that screamed money and entitlement. And you are? Hotel security, Marcus replied evenly, though he kept his eyes on Elena. Miss, is there a problem here? There's no problem, the man said before Elena could respond. This is a private conversation between me and my fiancé. Ex-fiancé, Elena said quietly, but her voice was firm. David, I already told you, it's over. My sister is coming to get me, and I'll arrange to pick up my things later this week. Our things, David corrected, his voice taking on a patronizing tone that made Marcus's skin crawl. Elena, you're being dramatic. You're upset, which is understandable, but running away isn't going to solve anything. We can work through this. Marcus watched Elena's face, saw the way she seemed to shrink slightly at David's words. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Miss Elena, he said, stepping slightly closer. Didn't you say your ride was coming to pick you up? Elena straightened, seeming to remember that she wasn't alone. Yes. My sister Sarah should be here any minute. Elena? Be reasonable, David continued, his tone growing sharper. You can't just throw away 2 years over some pre-wedding jitters. Think about what you're doing. Think about your future. What are you going to do? Move back in with your sister like some college dropout? You have a life with me, a good life. You have responsibilities. I have a life, Elena said, her voice growing stronger. Not a life with you. My life. And I'm taking it back. David's face darkened. You're being selfish, Elena. Childish. This isn't just about you. Do you have any idea how much money we've spent on this wedding? How embarrassing this is for both our families? I'll pay you back, Elena said. For everything. Every penny. With what money? David laughed harshly. You don't even have a job anymore, remember? You quit because I could support us both. You have nothing without me. Marcus felt his hands clench into fists, but he forced himself to remain calm. This wasn't his fight, but every instinct he had was screaming at him to intervene. Elena, he said quietly. Do you want to wait inside while your sister gets here? She doesn't need to wait anywhere, David snapped. This is ridiculous. Elena, get in the car. We're going home and we're going to talk about this like adults. I'm not going anywhere with you, Elena said, and Marcus was proud to hear the steel in her voice. I said no, David. I'm not going to keep explaining myself. You're making a huge mistake, David said, his voice taking on a different tone, softer, but somehow more menacing. You think you're strong enough to make it on your own? You couldn't even handle planning our wedding without having a breakdown. You needed me for everything. Who's going to take care of you now? Marcus saw Elena flinch, saw doubt flicker across her face, and he couldn't stay quiet anymore. Sounds like she's taking care of herself just fine, he said, stepping between Elena and David. She's made her decision. I think you should respect that. David looked Marcus up and down with obvious disdain. And I think you should mind your own business. This is between me and my fiancé. Ex-fiancé, Marcus corrected. And anything that happens on hotel property is my business. We're not on hotel property, David said with a smirk. We're on a public sidewalk. Actually, Marcus replied, pulling out his phone, you're wrong about that. This sidewalk is part of the hotel's property line, and if Miss Elena doesn't want to talk to you, then you're trespassing. It was a bluff, but a confident one. David clearly wasn't sure about the property lines either, because his smirk faltered. Elena, this is insane. You're going to let some rent-a-cop dictate your life now? I'm going to make my own decisions, Elena said, her voice gaining strength with each word. And my decision is that I don't want to talk to you anymore tonight. Please leave. David stared at her for a long moment, his face cycling through anger, disbelief, and something that looked almost like panic. Fine, he said finally. But when you come crawling back, Elena, when you realize what a mistake you've made, don't expect me to be waiting. I won't, Elena said simply. David shot one more venomous look at Marcus, then stalked away toward the parking garage. Marcus and Elena stood in silence until they heard a car engine start and tires squeal as David drove away. Are you okay? Marcus asked, studying Elena's face in the light from the hotel entrance. Elena let out a shaky breath. I think so. Thank you for that. You didn't have to get involved. Yes, I did, Marcus said without hesitation. Nobody should have to deal with that kind of pressure. The terrible thing is, part of me was starting to believe him, Elena said quietly. Even knowing what he's like, even after everything I realized tonight, I was starting to think maybe he was right. Maybe I am making a huge mistake. That's not a flaw in you, Marcus said gently. That's what people like him count on. They wear you down until you start doubting your own judgment. Elena looked at him with curiosity. You really do know about this, don't you? This isn't just professional experience. Marcus hesitated, then decided on honesty. My ex-wife wasn't like your David, but I've seen enough situations like yours to recognize the patterns. And I've had my own experiences with people who make you question your reality. Before Elena could respond, a car pulled up to the curb, and a woman about Elena's age jumped out. She was taller than Elena, with short auburn hair and fierce eyes that immediately scanned the area as if looking for threats. Elena! She rushed over and pulled Elena into a tight hug. I'm so sorry it took me so long. Traffic was horrible. She pulled back and looked at her sister's face. Are you okay? You sounded so upset on the phone. I'm okay, Elena said, and Marcus could hear that she was telling the truth. Sarah, this is Marcus. He's been incredibly kind to me tonight. Marcus, this is my sister Sarah. Sarah turned to Marcus with a grateful expression. Thank you, she said simply. For whatever you did, thank you. Just doing my job, Marcus replied, though they all knew it had gone beyond that. Is that your car? Sarah asked, nodding toward the parking garage where David had disappeared. No, that was David, Elena said. He showed up a few minutes ago trying to convince me to come home with him. Sarah's expression darkened. That manipulative son of a... She caught herself and took a deep breath. I'm sorry. I know you loved him, but Elena... I've been worried about you for months. You stopped calling as much. You stopped coming to family dinners. You seemed like you were walking on eggshells all the time. I know, Elena said quietly. I can see it now. I just couldn't then. Marcus felt like he was intruding on a private moment, but Sarah turned to him again. Were you here when he showed up? What was he like? Persistent, Marcus said diplomatically. Your sister handled it well, though. With your help, Elena added. Sarah, he was trying to convince me that I couldn't make it without him, that I was being dramatic and selfish. If Marcus hadn't been here, I would have figured it out, Elena continued after a pause. I hope I would have anyway. But it was easier with backup. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Elena, I'm so proud of you. I know this couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, Elena admitted, but it was right. I knew at the moment I was supposed to say I do, and I just couldn't. It felt like I was about to sign my own death sentence. Marcus felt something twist in his chest at her words. There was so much pain there, so much more than just a broken engagement. I should let you two go, he said. I'm sure you have a lot to talk about. Actually, Elena said, surprising him, could I ask you something? You mentioned your ex-wife earlier. How did you know when it was time to leave? The question caught Marcus off guard. He'd never talked about Lisa with a stranger before, had barely talked about her with friends. But there was something about Elena's situation that made him want to be honest. I didn't leave, he admitted. She did. But looking back, I think I should have seen the signs earlier. We weren't wrong for each other in the same way you and David were wrong for each other. But we weren't right either. We just settled. Got comfortable with being unhappy. That sounds lonely, Elena said softly. It was, but not as lonely as staying in something that wasn't real would have been. Marcus paused. Elena, I know we just met, and I know this isn't my place, but what you did tonight, that took incredible courage. Most people don't have the strength to walk away from their own wedding. Most people probably have better judgment than I do, Elena said with a rueful smile. They probably wouldn't have gotten that far in the first place. Don't do that, Sarah said sharply. Don't blame yourself for David's behavior. You trusted someone you loved. That's not a character flaw. Marcus nodded in agreement. She's right. The person who manipulates isn't the same as the person who gets manipulated. One is making a choice to hurt someone, the other is trying to love someone. Elena looked between Marcus and Sarah, seeming to absorb their words. I think I'm going to need to learn how to trust my own judgment again, she said finally. That will come, Marcus said with certainty. It takes time, but it comes. A comfortable silence fell over the three of them. Marcus knew he should go back inside, finish his shift, let Elena and her sister drive away and never see them again. But something was holding him there, some instinct that the night wasn't over yet. Elena, Sarah said gently, we should probably get going. It's late, and you've had a long day. You're right, Elena agreed, but she turned to Marcus one more time. I know you said you were just doing your job, but it felt like more than that. Thank you for seeing me as a person worth protecting. You are, Marcus said without hesitation. And Elena, what you said about learning to trust your judgment again. Start with trusting that you made the right choice tonight, because you absolutely did. Elena smiled, and for the first time since Marcus had met her, it reached her eyes. I will, she said. I'll try to remember that. As Marcus watched them drive away, Elena's words echoed in his mind. Thank you for seeing me as a person worth protecting. It occurred to him that maybe protection wasn't always about stepping in during a crisis. Maybe sometimes it was about seeing someone's worth when they'd forgotten it themselves, about believing in their strength when they'd temporarily lost faith in it. He thought about David's words, about how he'd tried to convince Elena she was nothing without him. Marcus had seen that kind of psychological manipulation before, but experiencing it firsthand, seeing how it worked in real time, had shaken something loose in him. It made him think about his own relationships, his own patterns, his own assumptions about what love was supposed to look like. As he headed back into the hotel to finish his shift, Marcus realized that Elena wasn't the only one who had learned something important that night. Sometimes protecting someone else taught you how to protect yourself too. 6 weeks later, Marcus was surprised to see Elena walk into the hotel lobby during his afternoon shift. She looked completely different from the distressed woman in the wedding dress he'd met that night. Her hair was shorter, styled in a way that framed her face confidently. She wore dark jeans and a blue sweater that brought out her eyes, and most notably, she walked with purpose. Marcus? She approached the security desk where he was reviewing the day's reports. I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I wanted to thank you properly for what you did that night. Marcus stood up, genuinely pleased to see her. Elena, you look great. How are you doing? Better, she said, and he could hear the truth in her voice. Much better, actually. I know it's been a while, but I wanted to give you this. She handed him a small wrapped package. And to tell you something. Marcus unwrapped the gift to find a simple silver keychain with a compass charm attached. That's beautiful, he said, genuinely touched. But you didn't need to. I did, Elena interrupted. Marcus, that night you told me I made the right choice and to trust my judgment. I want you to know that those words probably saved my life. The intensity in her voice caught Marcus off guard. What do you mean? Elena glanced around the lobby, then back at him. Do you have a few minutes? I know you're working, but there are some things I never told you that night. Things I couldn't tell you then because I was still figuring them out myself. Marcus checked his watch. His supervisor was in a meeting and the lobby was quiet. Sure. Want to sit in the lounge upstairs? Actually, could we just walk? Maybe around the block? I spend too much time inside these days. They stepped out into the crisp autumn afternoon. Elena was quiet for the first few minutes, seeming to gather her thoughts. Finally, she spoke. "Do you remember when David said I'd had a breakdown while planning the wedding?" Marcus nodded. "I remember thinking that was a cruel thing to bring up. The thing is, he wasn't entirely wrong. I did have what I thought was a breakdown. But it wasn't about wedding planning stress." Elena paused at a crosswalk, looking straight ahead. 3 months ago, I started having panic attacks. Terrible ones. I'd wake up in the middle of the night feeling like I was dying, my heart racing, unable to breathe. During the day, I'd suddenly feel like the walls were closing in on me. "That sounds terrifying," Marcus said quietly. It was, and David was so supportive, at least on the surface. He took me to doctors, held my hand through appointments, researched treatments online, but he also started making all my decisions for me. He said I was too fragile to handle stress, so he took over the wedding planning. He said I shouldn't drive when I was having anxiety, so he started driving me everywhere. He said work was clearly too much pressure, so I should quit my job and focus on getting better. Marcus felt a cold understanding wash over him. He isolated you. Completely. But he did it so gradually, and he framed it as protection, as love. Every time I questioned whether I was losing too much independence, he'd point to my anxiety attacks as proof that I needed his help. Elena stopped walking and turned to face him. "Marcus, I realize now that those panic attacks weren't random. They started right after I gave up my apartment and moved in with him. My body was trying to tell me something my mind wasn't ready to hear. That you weren't safe. That I wasn't myself anymore. That I was disappearing." Elena resumed walking, her pace slightly faster now. "After I left that night, after Sarah picked me up, I stayed with her for a week. And you know what? I didn't have a single panic attack. Not one." Marcus shook his head, feeling anger rise in his chest. "He convinced you that you were sick, when really you were having a normal response to an abnormal situation." "Exactly. And the terrible part is, I was so grateful to him for taking care of me. I thought I was lucky to have someone who would love me even when I was broken." Elena's voice was steady, but Marcus could hear the pain underneath. "But I wasn't broken, Marcus. I was being systematically dismantled, piece by piece." They walked in silence for a block. Marcus found himself thinking about all the ways someone could hurt another person without ever raising a hand, without ever even raising their voice. It was insidious, the kind of damage that was hard to name and harder to prove. "What's helping now?" Marcus asked finally. "You said you're doing better." "Therapy, for one thing. I found someone who specializes in psychological abuse. I didn't even know that was a thing, but apparently it's more common than I thought." Elena smiled ruefully. "Also, I moved back to the city. I'm renting a tiny studio apartment that I can barely afford, but it's mine. Every single thing in it is there because I chose to put it there." "That sounds like freedom." "It is. Terrifying, overwhelming, wonderful freedom." Elena laughed. And it was a sound Marcus remembered from that first night, but warmer now, more genuine. "I also started painting again. I'd given it up because David said it was messy and impractical, but I forgot how much I loved it. I'm actually having a small show next month at a local cafe." "Elena, that's incredible." "It's scary," she corrected. "But incredible too, yes." She looked at him seriously. "Marcus, I need you to understand something. That night when you stepped in, when you treated me like a person capable of making her own decisions, when you believed me when I said I didn't want to go with David, that was the first time in months that anyone had respected my autonomy. It reminded me that I had it." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. A recognition of how powerful simple respect could be when someone had been denied it for so long. "You would have figured it out eventually." "Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe I would have gotten in that car with him and spent the next few years apologizing for existing just like I said that night. Elena stopped walking again, this time in front of the hotel entrance. The point is, you saw me as someone worth protecting. But more than that, you saw me as someone capable of protecting herself. You didn't try to rescue me, Marcus. You just stood with me while I rescued myself. The distinction hit Marcus with surprising force. He thought about all the times in his life when he'd tried to fix things for people, to solve their problems, to be their hero. But Elena was right. He hadn't tried to solve anything for her that night. He'd just witnessed her strength and reflected it back to her when she couldn't see it herself. "I've been thinking about that night a lot," Marcus admitted. "About what you said about feeling like you were wearing someone else's clothes. I think I've been doing that in some ways too." "How so?" Marcus hesitated. He wasn't used to talking about personal things with relative strangers, but Elena had shared so much with him that holding back seemed dishonest. "I've been playing it safe for years. After my divorce, after some other disappointments, I just stopped taking risks, stopped putting myself out there. I told myself it was being practical, but really I think I was just scared of making another mistake. And now? Now I'm thinking that maybe the mistake isn't in trying and failing. Maybe the mistake is in not trying at all." Marcus looked up at the hotel building where he worked, where he'd been content to stay in the same position for years without really growing or challenging himself. "You walked away from a wedding, from a life that looked good on paper but felt wrong in reality. That took incredible courage." "You helped me find that courage," Elena said softly. "No," Marcus replied with certainty. "I just reminded you it was there." Elena smiled at him, the kind of smile that suggested she was seeing him clearly, maybe more clearly than he saw himself. "What are you going to do with yours?" The question hung between them, and Marcus realized he didn't have an answer yet. But for the first time in years, he felt like he might be ready to find one. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I'm ready to figure it out." Elena nodded approvingly. "Good. Because you know what I learned? Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you don't know what comes next, but you're willing to find out." They stood in front of the hotel for a moment, two people who had met during one of the worst nights of Elena's life and somehow helped each other find a path forward. "I should let you get back to work," Elena said finally. "But Marcus, if you ever want to come to my art show, or if you just want to talk to someone who understands about finding your way back to yourself, here's my number." She handed him a small card with her contact information. "I'd like that," Marcus said, pocketing the card. "Both things, actually." Elena grinned. "I hope you figure out what you want to do with your courage. And when you do, I hope you remember that you're worth protecting too. Your dreams, your happiness, your future, they all matter." As Marcus watched Elena walk away, he thought about the compass charm on the keychain she'd given him. She'd said it was a thank you, but he suspected it was more than that. It was a reminder that knowing which direction you wanted to go was only the first step. Actually moving in that direction, taking one step and then another even when you couldn't see the destination clearly, that was the real work. Marcus returned to his shift with a different energy than he'd felt in months. He found himself paying attention to things he'd stopped noticing, thinking about possibilities he'd stopped considering. That evening, he looked up local colleges that offered criminal justice programs. He researched private investigation licenses. He made a list of all the things he'd wanted to try, but had talked himself out of. 3 months later, Marcus submitted his resignation letter to the hotel. He was starting a new job with a firm that specialized in helping people in situations like Elena's, gathering evidence, providing security, sometimes just being a witness to someone's truth when the world seemed determined to deny it. Elena came to his going-away party at work, bringing a small painting she'd made of the hotel lobby at night with warm light spilling out onto the sidewalk. "For your new office," she said, "to remind you where you learned to trust your instincts." "This is beautiful," Marcus said, studying the painting. In it, the hotel didn't look like just a building. It looked like a place where important things happened, where people found safety and strength. "It's how I see that night now," Elena explained. "Not as the night I almost made a terrible mistake, but as the night I found my way back to myself. The night someone saw me clearly and helped me see myself clearly too." Marcus understood then that protection wasn't always about standing between someone and danger. Sometimes it was about standing with someone while they found their own strength, about believing in their capacity for healing when they'd forgotten they had it. Elena had needed more than words that night, but she hadn't needed someone to save her. She'd needed someone to witness her saving herself, to remind her that she was worth the effort, to reflect back her own courage when fear made it hard to see. As Marcus hung the painting in his new office, he realized that in learning to protect Elena's autonomy and strength, he'd discovered his own. In seeing her clearly, he'd finally learned to see himself clearly too. The compass on his keychain pointed true north, but Marcus had learned that the most important direction wasn't necessarily forward. Sometimes it was inward, toward the person you'd always had the potential to be but had forgotten how to access. Sometimes protection meant helping someone find their way back to themselves. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, helping someone else find their strength reminded you exactly where you'd left your own.